I myself experienced burnout around the beginning of the pandemic. And I went to go talk to a therapist who diagnosed me very quickly as being an overachiever who is now stuck at home and can't overachieve. That was it. That was the diagnosis. That was my complex, overachiever complex. And he said, he's like, we can work on that. And I was like, I don't want to work on that. Being an overachiever, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, but it's untenable. You can't sustain it. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And he countered with a very clever retort that I think he learned from Harvard Medical School. But you're here. And I was like, oh, touche. And what he said to me then, I think profoundly changed everything. He said, Laura, you don't have to give the trophies back. And in that moment, it was like I breathed for the first time, probably in 10 years. You don't have
Wow.
to give the trophies back. He's like, nobody is paying that much attention to you to know if you're collecting the next trophy and the next trophy and the next trophy. You are the sum of everything you've done to this point, and you don't have to continue the same pace in order to be of the same value. And for me, it really changed a lot. And not only that, I not only decided that I was going to no longer keep striving to impress people with trophies I didn't want, impress the people I didn't care about. I was actually going to decide what trophies I did actually want and then move at my own pace to collect those. And it turned out that I was a lot lighter and more agile when I wasn't weighed down by all those other trophies.
Welcome my guest, Laura Gassner Otting. Laura's secret superpower is seeing your greatness and reflecting it back to you so that you could get unstuck and achieve extraordinary results. A serial entrepreneur who has started and sold a successful international executive search firm, philanthropical and political action committees from scratch, and a White House appointee on the team who created the national service project AmeriCorps. Laura is a frequent contributor to Good Morning America, The Today Show, Harvard Business Review, and OprahDaily. Laura is the best-selling author of 3 books, Wonderhell, Limitless, and Mission Driven. Her latest book, Wonderhell, Why Success Doesn't Feel Like It Should and What You Should Do About It, debuted in April 2023 on number 2 on the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list. All right, welcome to another episode on Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast. I am so happy to welcome on the show Laura Gassner Otting. Welcome to the show.
Hello. It's good to see you.
I know, it's so great to connect. As we were talking about kind of before we press record, we have a lot of mutual friends, and I just love, connecting with the friends or friends of friends on the show because I feel like just there's synergy already. So it's going to be a fun conversation. And I was telling you that I absolutely love your new book, Wonderhell. I wasn't sure what it was when I first heard the name. I was like, what is this about? And I'm excited to dive into this topic. But as I was diving into your book, I'm like, this is a fun book. This is entertaining and I love it.
Well, I love to write. I love to explore topics of why success doesn't always equal happiness or why it feels like it should. And these topics can be big and heavy. And I just thought, life is really short and we only have one of them and we should really enjoy it. So let's enjoy the conversation also about how to enjoy life a little bit more. So the book is, instead of being like a big idea, like here's the problem, here's the solution, and here's what you need to do, it's more just, it's this kind of choose your own adventure, amusement park themed book where we're all walking through success. And sometimes you feel like you're in imposter town, and sometimes you're in Doubtsville, and sometimes you're in Burnout City. And what are all the emotions that we have in each of those moments? And how do we enjoy the ride? So I thought it would be kind of fun to do it in a way that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go into that. But first, I want to talk about kind of your background, because you spent a couple decades interviewing people, bringing on executives and whatnot. So what was like the common thread you learned? Because as you mentioned, that success doesn't necessarily equal happiness. So what would you say is a common thread that you learned through all of these interviews and all the people you talked to about success?
Well, so my last book, Limitless, it was really based on those 2 decades of being hired as an executive recruiter to recruit away some of the most successful people in the world to go work for my clients. And so my job was to call these people because of all the success. And what I was surprised about is that even though I was calling them because of all the success, they weren't very happy, which is why they were all calling me back. And I was so fascinated by this question of why success doesn't equal happiness. And so I wrote Limitless as a way to help people based on stewarding thousands of people through these massive moments of life and career shift to really think about creating a definition of success that works for them. So Limitless is really built around this idea of alignment and flow. How do we become consonant with who we are and what we're trying to do so that we're not exhausted by doing too much of what doesn't matter to us, but actually really living into the stuff that really does turn us on and give us joy. What I found after that book came out is that when you define success for yourself and then you go after it, when you start actually getting some success in that way. So maybe you sold a company, or maybe you just sold your first tube of lipstick, right? You've sold your first coaching program. When you start feeling success, you're like, wow, the work I did opened more doors than I ever thought possible. And behind that, I see even more doors that I never thought possible for me. And maybe now I want it, right? So in this moment, after we've defined success as something that matters to us, once we start going after it, that's when it gets real, because that's when you actually really care about the outcome. And so what I found when I was in this moment was like, wow, this is amazing. It's exciting. It's humbling. It's wonderful to start feeling some success in this way. And also when I look at that future version of who I can become, which I've now learned through the success I just had, it's full of anxiety and stress and uncertainty and imposter syndrome and doubt and exhaustion and burnout. It's wonderful and it's hell. It's Wonderhell.
And you coined this term, which I love. Like initially, like I said, I didn't know what it meant. But if you could kind of share, where did this inspiration of Wonderhell come from? Like, what was the moment where you're like, oh, this is what it is? And can you explain, what does the Wonderhell mean to you?
Yes. So Wonderhell is the space in between who you were yesterday and who you just realized through your actions today that you can become tomorrow. Right. So Wonderhell is the space in your psyche where the burden of your newfound potential walks in and is like, hey there, what you got for me? Are you going to live into this newfound you that you didn't even know existed last week, last month, or last year? Or are you going to let it pass you by? Right. So this moment where you're like, oh, I have this choice to make. And I had that moment when I was sitting on an airplane on a flight back from Vancouver to Boston. So my last book, Limitless, debuts #2 Washington Post bestseller right behind Michelle Obama. Amazing. I get the news as I'm heading to the airport from an event where I was literally opening for Malala. Like Malala. Like I was like one of the speakers right before her.
Okay.
Crazy. I get to the airport, I get this news, and I'm sitting on the plane looking at my selfie that I awkwardly took with Malala and looking at this text from my publisher telling me that it debuted as a bestseller. And suddenly I was so exhausted from the work of book launch that the part of my brain that normally governs my humility was like nowhere to be found. And I looked at this and I sat there, and all I could hear in my head was this little voice going, this thing has legs. It could be bigger. You could be bigger. And I thought to myself, well, I did Washington Post. Like, what about Wall Street Journal? What about New York Times? Someone got to sit under the oak tree with Oprah. Why not me? Right? I had this moment where there was no humility whatsoever, no humble brag, none of that nonsense that we're socialized to think about. And the full force of my ego went, you can do it. You can be more. And in that moment, I thought, everybody always tells you if you can name it, you can tame it. I thought, I don't want to tame it. I don't want to tame it. I want to claim it. I want to name it so I could claim it. Like, it's not enough to say, oh, lucky me. Oh, I just got lucky. It was somebody else. I was just, it wasn't, it was, it's just, yeah, anybody could do it. I wanted to say, you know what? I worked my butt off for this. I tried harder for this than anything I've ever done professionally. And I hustled and I hustled and I worked and I exhausted myself and I did it. And in doing it, I realized that there's even more inside of me. And that's okay to be like, there's even more inside of me and I want it. I want it in a way that makes sense for me. And that was when I was like, well, I'm not like sitting on this plane, like coming from, Vancouver to Boston. I'm not like 1,200 miles from where I was and 1,200 miles from where I'm going. I'm in Wonderhell. I'm in this space in between, literally, physically, emotionally, metaphorically, in between two places. And the only one who gets to decide which me I can be is me. And I had to make a decision in that moment. Like when I walk off the plane in Boston, who am I going to be? What am I going to do next? What am I going to demand of myself moving forward? And what I write about in Wonderhell are these 100 people who I interviewed, these glass ceiling shatterers and Olympic medalists and startup unicorns, all who had that moment when they were faced with this question of which you are you going to be? And how they not only survive those moments, but actually learn to look forward to them and plan for them and learn from them and thrive in them instead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They are not limited by all these emotions that creep into for everybody that is pursuing something new and a big audacious goal. Like all these emotions creep in, and there's those people that become smaller with them, and then the ones that are truly successful rise and move through them, and they thrive through the experience.
Yeah, because we're told all those emotions are part and parcel of, stress and success. Like, in order to get there, you got to, work hard, you got to hustle hard, you got to rise and grind, like, shoulder the wheel. And, we're told that, like, gastric issues and ulcers and divorce, and we're told all those things are just like the slings and arrows we have to absorb on the way
Mm.
to success. And I think that's wrong. So, when I was in this moment, and then the pandemic happened, I took that time to read all the self-help books I could find out there. And most of them weren't that helpful because most of them define success as an end point. Like,
Mm.
just keep working, keep getting the ulcers, keep losing your hair, because as soon as you get there, everything will be easier. You can take care of your health then. You can take care of your relationships then. And what I found is that every time I've been successful at anything in my career, large or small, what was on the other side of that success was just a new increased imagination of who maybe I could become next. So there was never an end point. It was just a waypoint. It became a portal to all I could be. And so if we're putting off the taking care of ourselves and everyone around us until we're done, the final end point is 6 feet under. Like, that's it. I
Absolutely.
don't want to wait till then.
Absolutely. And some people have that idea is like, okay, I can only focus on this thing. Like, oh, I need to have success before I focus on a family or before I focus on my health. There's so many people that have that narrative. And as we were mentioning, a mutual friend, Brooke Hemingway, she talks about like, you could have it all. Like she built her 7-figure business in the process when she had a baby at like, I believe, 8 weeks old or something as she's breastfeeding. And it's like,
Yeah.
if we keep neglecting all the things outside our success bubble, then it's just going to be like, of course, when we achieve that success, we're like so burnt out, worn out, like depleted because we were just going after this one success that we thought would bring us happiness.
Yeah, and by the time we get to that success, often how we define success changes. So
Mm.
when I founded my business, like Brooke, my first baby was 6 weeks old. I quit the
Wow.
big firm. I started my own search firm. By the way, like, pro tip, that's hard, right? Like, figuring out who you are as an entrepreneur while you're figuring out who you are as a parent for the first time, kind of tricky, all while your hormones are like,
Right.
racing, trying to figure out like what's going on. Very challenging, but the way I defined success when I first started that company was very different than what I thought success was 6 years later when that kid was in kindergarten and his little brother was in preschool. And suddenly I had much more time on my hands. So if I were still running this consulting, quote unquote, project like I was when I started it 6 years earlier, I would have been running a very different company than the company I ended up selling to my team 15
Mm.
years after I founded it. That company became an international search firm. We did hundreds of searches every year. I had 30 staff everywhere from Seattle to Siberia and everywhere in between. But if I were running it for the same idea of success from what I started, it would have changed. And I think part of the problem is that we get this idea of what success means at some point when we're like 16, 17, 18 years old,
Mm-hmm.
when some guidance counselor says, pick a trade, pick a major, pick a path, pick a college. And we go, okay. And they give us this list of things that define what makes a good job good. But they never say, oh, and you should prioritize it so that what makes this job a good job is what makes it a good job for you.
Mm.
And that's very different. So some of us want to make a lot of money. Some of us want a lot of freedom and flexibility. Some of us want to have a lot of impact in the world. Some of us want to be inspired by a leader. Some of us want to just be home every day at 6 p.m. to make dinner for our family. Like, we all have different definitions. And right now I'm 52 and I'm about to send my second and last kid off to college. I'm going to be an empty nester. So if I was defining success as I have to be home every day at 6 o'clock to have
Right.
dinner with my family, what am I going to do in September, right? Like, where am I going to find that? So, like, our definitions have to keep constantly shifting and changing as we change, as our families change, as the world around us changes. And this definition that we are given, which, by the way, we're given before we literally have a frontal lobe, like the part of
Mm.
our brain that dictates good sound decision making, doesn't show up for 10 more years. We're asked to make these decisions that are going to affect the very rest of our lives before we literally have the capacity to make a good one. And I
Yeah.
think that's why spending time with people like Amberly and Brooke, and really like stopping and saying, well, that's what I used to want. Do I still want it? And if I do, I can go for it. And if I don't, I can also excuse myself with grace from that race and maybe join a different one.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good thing to point out because I know a lot of podcasters that are in this realm. They'll say, like, how do you define success? They'll ask that to their guests. And I've been asked that on interviews as well. And I'm like, I think with what you're saying, I think we need to revisit our definition of success, or another
How do
term,
you define success?
fulfillment. Well, I look at it more in a fulfillment package, if you want
Mm-hmm.
to say. So success to me would be really living a life of fulfillment. So waking up with passion to do what you're doing and have a purpose behind what you're pursuing. And so waking up, just honestly, like personal freedom. I think all of us
Mm-hmm.
want freedom. And so for me, it would be success is finding freedom in your days, in the actions, that your aligned actions, so that you feel that sense of freedom in your everyday. So I think revisiting maybe your definition through every stage you evolve would be a good way
Yes.
to make, like you were expressing, because it changes as we move into the next version of ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm for me, I love that you're talking about freedom, because I think that choice of how we spend our time is really the ultimate luxury.
Mm.
And I mean luxury, like you work your butt off to stay at the Four Seasons, you work your butt off to buy the Mercedes, you work your butt off to buy the Rolex, you work your butt off to buy your time, right? And like just having that time to say, like, I am going to go to yoga at 10 o'clock on a Friday, and I'm also going to decide to work on this client project at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. Like,
Mhm.
to be able to decide how we spend our time and what we do and who we spend it with. I think I've spent my entire career working to be able to have that kind of luxury in my life.
Right. Freedom and luxury of choosing your time wisely and how you're spending it and who you're spending it with.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when I ran my last company, I used to say all the time that, like, as an entrepreneur, I can make decisions based on maximizing, I think, three things: maximizing freedom and flexibility, maximizing impact in the world, and maximizing profit. And I think that you can make decisions based on one or two of those things for like a season, right? So you spend a year working on maximizing profit and maximizing impact. It means you're not going to have a lot of personal freedom and flexibility, right? So you can make decisions. You can't like make every decision based on different ones, but if you decide this is what's important to me on this season of
This
my life.
season.
So yeah, when my kids were younger, I wanted more personal freedom and flexibility, and I wanted to make impact in the world. I knew that if I did that, enough profits would come, right? And as I got older and the kids didn't need me as much, I was like, okay, we're going to drive more profit now because I know I'm going to sell this business. So I want to maximize what the valuation of the business is. But that meant I had much less, ability to be around all the time. And I think we have to make those decisions. But for me, that sort of personal freedom and flexibility right now at this point in my life is, bar none, that is the top, because as I mentioned, this kid's about to go to school. There's
Yeah.
only so much time I have left. And when he says to me, I'm off of school on Monday, Mom, let's drive to Portland, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because I'm not getting that time back.
It's so true. Yeah. All right. Let's go into Wonderhell a little bit. So,
Yes.
first of all, your book, like I said, it's a very creative, amusing, fun book. And it's because of what you created, like this visual of an amusement park. So just the sound of that sounds fun, right? So how did you come up with this idea? Because it's such a great way you lay it out because first of all, when I'm reading through all the stages, if you want to say, and we'll go into each kind of how you break it down, I was like, yep, I relate to that one. Yep, I relate to that one, you know. But that's the thing. This is the common thread is we all go through Wonderhell at some point, at least people that are evolving, right?
We all go through it, and I always tell people that the biggest compliment you can give to an author is, "Yep, I can relate to that," or like, "I feel like you wrote this just to me. I feel like you were in my head." Like I did, and I've been getting that a lot because I think these experiences are universal. These emotions are universal. So I would love to take credit for the amusement park, but I have to say that my dear friend Rahaf Harfouche, who wrote a great book called Hustle and Float, which is all about why how we as creatives lose our creativity when we're working in a very traditional workforce, and so it's all about humane productivity for creatives. We were talking one morning and I was like, everyone says like success is going to be fun. And then you get there and you're like, this sucks. Why does this suck? And she's like, yeah, it's kind of like an amusement park, huh? And I was like, say more about that. And she goes, you're at an amusement park and you think it's going to be super fun. You go to all the towns and go on all the rides. And then it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're sunburned and you're dehydrated. And that corn dog in your stomach is fighting with the cotton candy that you shouldn't have eaten. And you're standing in line for the roller coaster and you're like, what am I doing? I thought this was supposed to be fun. This isn't fun. She goes, it's kind of the same. And you could do this as this map where everybody goes in whatever order they want. And you have a little sign like, you are here. I was like, that's genius. And so I would love to take credit for it, but it really came from Rahaf and her idea that like, we are told that all these things in our lives are supposed to be fun. And then we get there and we're like, this is actually not fun. Why is this harder than I thought it was going to be?
Hell. Right?
It's hell. Yes. Your kids are whining. You're just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Can you walk us through the amusement park a little bit? What are the three, you have it broken down into 3 stages, if you want to say, I don't know if you call it stages, but
they're towns. Yeah. 3 towns. So when you get to Wonderhell, you have a choice of 1 or 3 towns. You can go to Imposter Town, Doubtsville, or Burnout City. And, when I was thinking about how to write this book, like when I wrote Limitless, it was, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's how to change your workplace, change your career, or change yourself in order to like solve the problem. Done. Very easy, very linear. But the issue with success is that each time we get to that new level, that new devil that appears is going to be very different for each and every one of us. So it may be uncertainty, it may be doubt, it may be imposter syndrome, it may be overwhelmed. Like it's going to be different for each and every one of us. And so there was no way to do it as a linear book. And so I wrote it kind of as you can read it from start to finish, or you can just choose your own adventure along the way. And so in each of the 3 towns of Imposter Town, Doubtsville, and Burnout City are 5 rides. And the rides are supposed to evoke the emotions that we feel. Like the Imaginarium is where you dream bigger. The Tent of Oddities is where you learn how to like be your true, freak show self. The roller coaster is dealing with uncertainty. The bumper cars are where you get knocked off path and you're dealing with, your perfectionist tendencies. The merry-go-round is like, how do we decide to say no to hustle porn and slow down, right? The loop-de-loop is the beginner's mindset. And so there are 15 rides throughout these 3 towns that really help people say like, oh, I'm dealing with that. I'm going to go ride that ride first.
It's so good. I love it. Okay, so let's go on some of the rides. So Imposter Town.
Pick your favorites.
Yeah. So Imposter Town is a big one, especially when you're going after a big audacious goal, like something you've never been in. I know I'm kind of in the midst of it, to be honest. So imposter syndrome is kind of like a common word you hear these days. Like I'm experiencing this, or some people don't even talk about it. They just experience it. Right. So how do we best survive imposters town? Because we have all these emotions when we're going through this whole imposterville, if you want to say, and the question really is like, how do we get through it? How do we rise above it and move through it so we could go at least experience some other towns?
Yeah. Well, so here's what I would say. I think that we have been sold this idea that we need to rise above the feeling. We need to get through the feeling. And when I was first feeling Wonderhell, I talked to all of these people hoping to find a way out. And here's the bad news. There's no way out. Okay. Here's the good news. We can learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable and renegotiate the relationship that we have with all these emotions so that we don't try to get out of imposter town. We don't try to get over imposter syndrome. We just say, wow, that's cool. I feel like an imposter. That means I'm somewhere I've never thought I'd get to. That means I'm somewhere that wasn't built for people who look like me or act like me or think like me or pray like me or love like me. Isn't that amazing that I'm in this new place that I never thought I could get to?
Mm.
And what those who I spoke to who thrived in Wonderhell did is they changed the voice in their head from saying a warning like, "Oh gosh, you haven't done this before," to a cheering, "Oh my gosh, you haven't done this before." So
Mm.
they turn the limitation of that feeling of I'm not good enough, people are going to find me out, into an invitation. How exciting. What an adventure. Isn't it cool that I've gotten beyond anywhere I thought I'd ever be? And so the first thing that they did is they really renegotiated their relationship with that emotion. The second thing that they did is they understood what this thing called pluralistic ignorance. And pluralistic ignorance is if I walk into a room and I feel like I don't belong, and so I puff up my chest and I try to fake it till I make it, you're going to see me, and you, because 70% of us have imposter syndrome, are probably going to have imposter syndrome. And you're going to say, "Oh, Laura looks like she knows what she's doing. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I better puff up my chest and fake it till I make it because I don't want her to think I don't know what I'm doing."
Mm.
And then I see that and I go, "Oh, well, Erica looks like she knows what she's doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should puff up my chest even more." And because we're both in this sort of vicious cycle of lying to ourselves and each other about, how we should act in that moment, neither one of us benefit by just being like, "Dude, I have no idea what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing? Cool. Let's figure it out together."
Mm.
Because what happens is we're so busy faking it till we make it that even if we do make it, we've made it on a house of cards. And what happens even more often is that when we're so busy trying to pretend like we know what we're doing, we're missing out on the conversations and the connections and all the little nuances that we would see along the way that would teach us that, in fact, nobody knows what we're doing. We're all making it up as we go along, and we could actually learn by just paying more attention. And so the way that we get, quote unquote, through imposter syndrome is to accept it not as this sling and arrow that we have to swallow down, but as a super helpful ally that says, "You're actually on the right track.
Mm.
Go you." That's awesome.
Go you. I love that. Yes, absolutely. Because it is like every expert was once a beginner. I love that because it's basically like to know, like, yes, you're starting something new, but through action, you will get better. I remember when I started this podcast 4 years ago, my goodness, imposter syndrome like galore. Like, who am I? Nobody knows me as this. Da, da, da. And it's just through every action, you get better and better. It's like that's how you build confidence is through action. I think that's the best thing is like just starting, right?
Absolutely. It's funny. We think that like people are just born confident and they're amazing. And look, that person could do it. But I mean, so I am right now training for my sixth marathon.
6.
And
Wow.
I ran my sixth, right? But I ran my very first mile of my life right before I turned 40 years old, like of my life. So I know you have a history in fitness. Like I did not, right? Like I had every excuse in the book to get out of gym class. My very first mile of my life when I turned 40. And after that, it took me 6 weeks to actually run this mile without like leaning over and hurling. But after that, I mean, literally. And after that, I was all hopped up on endorphins. So I was like, "Ooh, I just ran a mile. Maybe I could run 5K. Like if I string 3 of those together, I could run a 5K." And then I signed up for the Couch to 5K and I ran a 5K. Ran is like generous, but I completed a 5K. At the end of the 5K, I was like, if I string 2 of those together, maybe I could do a 10K.
That's great.
I did a 10K again 6 weeks later. And then I was like, well, if I string 2 of those together and tack on another mile, maybe there's a half marathon. But if I had woken up that day and said, I'm going to go to like a boot camp and actually like get myself in shape, having never exercised in my life, would I have woken up and been like, I'm going to run 6 marathons? No, because how would I have had the confidence to do it? But the confidence to do all those marathons came from the competence that I showed myself. Like, oh, I could run a mile. Awesome. Now I have the confidence to dream about a 5K. I finally had confidence to do a 5K. Now I have the confidence to dream about a 10K. But I think this idea of like, I'm going to put my butt in the chair and I'm going to record a podcast over and over and over again for 4 years,
Yeah.
you have confidence because you showed yourself competence. You allowed yourself to fail and to grow and to iterate and to innovate and to get better.
Yes.
And that's where confidence comes from.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's called what is it called? It's called the credibility, competence, confidence loop. that it
Oh
just like
yeah,
the
I love that.
more, it's something I learned from Bedros Keuilian, and I thought it always stuck with me because I'm like, that's exactly how you build confidence, and it's a continuous loop. The more you do it, the more you better you get, and just continues. So
Yes.
so good. So going back to Imposterville, you share one of the things that I love is the make your own luck, which is the fortune teller, and I like this one because the when you're trying something new, sometimes you have to get innovative and you have to create the path, right? You need to create it sometimes by, again, stepping in the space and doing it. So like, can you kind of go deeper into make your own luck, the fortune teller,
Yeah,
for
so
example?
I was so interested in that because I thought that people are just born lucky, right? I was like, what's all this nonsense about manifestation and luck and all this? And it turns out that there's real science behind both, which is pretty cool. So studies have shown that there are specific things that quote unquote lucky people do. And we can emulate all of them. So what do? They create and notice chance opportunities. They listen to their intuition. They have positive expectations and they adopt a resilient attitude that turns bad outcomes into good outcomes. So what does that mean? It means they are much more open to seeing opportunities. If there's an event, they'll be like, oh, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to go to it because I don't know what's going to happen, but just being in the deal flow can't hurt, right? So they do that. They listen to their intuition. They listen to that voice that says they've seen a lot of things up until this point. So what is it telling them is going to happen in the future? And they trust that voice because they know that that's taken on a lot of different bits of data. They have positive expectations. If I go, things will work out. And that energy that they put out into the world, that things are going to be good, things are going to work out, actually is absorbed by other people around them. So they don't have this like negative, people want to get away from them. It doesn't feel really good. Like people want to be in the space of somebody who's open and sort of glowing from within. And then the last thing is that this resilience, they see failure not as finale, but as fulcrum, a point where they can learn and they can grow. And that brings me to the manifestation piece because I think they sort of go together. I've listened to people over so many years talking about putting things on their vision board and
Right.
their manifestation. I was like, okay, I know that it feels really good to think that you've manifested like the perfect partner, the perfect business opportunity, the perfect, trip to Japan, but you can't. That doesn't make any sense. Like how could you make that thing happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then I did some research on it and it turns out that we get something like 50 million bits of data every single second, like into our brain from like, what's the temperature in the room to, is that a bird chirping to, like what are the facial expressions the person I'm talking to is making right now, like all the things, but we can only take in like, I don't know, 11 of them every single second. So what does that mean? That means if you put something on your vision board, like
Mm-hmm.
I want to go to Japan, you are telling your brain to intentionally pluck those bits of data out of the millions that are coming at you.
Mm.
So when you put your little vision board of like the cherry blossoms and a pagoda on, as part of your dream, suddenly you see a bus going by that has a deal on a trip to Japan and you're like, I manifested it. It's like, well, you didn't manifest it, but you intentionally told your brain to pick it out. And so what people do who make themselves lucky is they are able to tap into that intuition. They're able
Mm.
to tap into the things that they want so that they can intentionally tell themselves like, notice the person giving side eye or notice the person who's walking in and seems uncomfortable, but if you talk to them, you'll be able to actually get a conversation going. You never know who they're going to be. They might be great. And so this idea of really trusting ourselves and what it is that we want in the world and knowing that the world puts it all out there for us. We just have to be intentional about making the decision and grabbing onto those opportunities is
Yeah.
sort of how lucky people do it. And I will say one more thing, which is this feels very extroverted, right? Put yourself out there, talk to
Mm-hmm.
lots of people, go out there. I'm an introvert. I could talk to you all day long, one-on-one all day long. But if you put me in a room of 10 people or 100 people, I'll curl up in fetal position rather than like working the room.
Yeah.
So I act as a situational extrovert.
Mm.
I'm a luck tourist.
I'm
So when
like
I
that
have to
too.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I have to do the thing, I can do the thing. Then I go home and I like curl up in a fetal
Yes.
position at home, right? And I order, DoorDash. But in the moment, I can act like a lucky person acts. I
Mm.
can act like an extrovert acts so that I can grab all the opportunity that comes to them and then I can like go back into my hole.
Yeah, it's kind of an art to be able to do that. But I think there's a lot of, it's funny, I think a lot of keynote speakers as yourself are actually introverts. And that's what's so
Isn't that amazing?
it's so it's fascinating to me because I learned this knowing so many keynote speakers now. I'm like, all of them are introverts, but they know how to turn on the extrovert when needed. It's like art.
When I was backstage at Good Morning America last week, my niece, who's like 25 years old, came with me, and like one of the producers walked in, and I was like, "Hello, it's great to be here. Let's do the segment." And then as soon as she walked out, I was like, "Okay." And my niece was like, "It is amazing to me how you turn it
Turn it
on
on.
and you turn it off, and it's not like you're faking it when they're here. Like this
Yes.
is who you are. You just like embody like front of camera person." Behind the
Yes.
scenes person, like back and forth. And I don't even, it's not even like oh God, that was hard. It was just like, there's just two different energies. And I can only, there's only so much of the big energy that
Yes.
I have that I
Yes.
have to be able to do it. And you know, it was such a relief to me to find out that so many keynote speakers are introverts, because I felt like a complete freak when I was, you know, feeling taxed by being on stage when all these other people feel like alive, until I realized that they all feel taxed because they're leaving everything out there. And you're having this
Absolutely.
conversation with 5,000 people. They're just not saying their part out loud. Right. So
Yeah.
you can do it as, it's actually a really good job for an introvert,
Yeah.
surprisingly.
It's so interesting. Okay. So talking about imposter syndrome, kind of the other side is the self-doubt. And I'm just curious, how do you think we could go through self-doubt less painfully? Because it sometimes like that's like that self-doubt like could shrink us. So what would you say, like what ride should we go to? Like,
So I think here's what I would say. I would say that we can go on the roller coaster, right? Like, how do we deal with uncertainty? How do we deal with uncertainty when, like, we're not sure what's going to happen? And so I'll tell you about two things that I learned. The first is a study, and the second is from a group of interviews. From the study, I learned that people who are facing a big decision, should I start a business? Should I leave my spouse? Should I buy the car? Like, whatever the thing is, studies have shown that if they flip a coin and the coin says, go for it, yes, they feel better about the decision months and years later,
wow.
even if they are not satisfied with the outcome. Even if in hindsight they said it was a bad decision, they still feel better about having made the decision, having moved forward with something.
Mm.
Action beats stagnation every day of the week. And so a lot of times when we're in doubt, we are in this sort of analysis paralysis and we don't do anything at all. And the people who choose the status quo, even if it's safer, are the ones who are less happy in the end. So, you know, if you are filled with doubt, the only way to reduce the doubt is to have more data. And the only way to have more data is to actually try some things, is to experiment. Now, you could say, I'm going to actively sit still for the next 3 months while I gather data on these specific things. But that also is a specific action, right? You're making an action to like, this is the information I want to collect. But if you're just like, I'm just going to sit and wait, that's stagnation, and action will always beat stagnation. So I think that's the first. The second piece is that we have to really know that we cannot control the outcome. We can only control the inputs. So I talked to a number of Olympic medalists and Hall of Famers, and I asked them all, like, what do you think about when you're there, like in the starting blocks? You're about to go. It's like the race of a lifetime, the gold medal run. What do you think about? And the answer, literally every single one of them, was nothing. Like, I was like, you don't imagine the race. You don't like envision the finish line. They're like, no, I think about nothing. My mind is clear because I trust the work. And in the documentary, The Last Dance, where Michael Jordan talks about the Chicago Bulls, and there's this moment where he talks about like, okay, so you won 2 world championships. You're about to go for a third. Nobody's ever three-peated. Were you nervous? And he said, no, because I trusted my skills. I know I did the work. I know I showed up every day. I know I put in everything I could put in. I trusted the process.
Beautiful.
Now I can trust the outcome. And I thought that that was pretty good. So like when we're in this moment of doubt, we're in doubt because we're like, will it work in a month, in a year, in 10 years, in a week, whatever, this thing in the distance? We don't know. But what we do know is we can control the things that we can do today to make sure that we've done everything we can to make it work.
Yeah, that's so great. And
It's not a glamorous answer, but
yeah, no,
it's the
but
answer.
simple, easy. There you go. So we all know when we reach a higher level of success, and it's funny, I shared a reel this morning of the past episode this week, and I'm just seeing it, and it makes me laugh because this is a common thing that happens when you reach a higher level of success. The haters and naysayers come out. It's like,
Mhm.
it's so fascinating that's why they always say, don't read the comments, don't read the reviews, because they come out. So
Mhm. Mhm.
what would you say to deal with this? Because some people really let it affect them. And I remember listening to Bren Brown share about that, like when you're in the arena, don't listen to the people that are outside the arena that have never stepped into the arena, because those are they're not the ones that should be speaking to you, basically.
Yeah, I know. I joke around that I want to get T-shirts printed out that say like, "Before you tell me what to do, show me what you've done," and on the back it's like hashtag Give me the P&L. Like
That's
I don't.
great.
There are a lot of people who are going to give you advice and criticism and quote unquote love, right? Gosh, I just don't want to see you get hurt. Like, it's like, bless your heart. So I think that there are a lot of people in our lives who we give votes to, who we shouldn't even be giving voices to. And some of those people in our families, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I love my parents. They're wonderful. They're supportive. They're great. I'm lucky to have them. But the last time I lived in the same house as my parents, I was 17 years old. So when I told him I was leaving, I was dropping out of law school to join a presidential campaign. When I told him I was leaving the White House to go into executive search, when I told him I was leaving the big search firm to start my own, when I told him I was leaving the search firm to do who the hell knows what, and oh, by the way, now I'm going to write books and do keynote speaking.
Yeah.
Each time they were like, "Are you sure you should do that? Are you sure it's a good idea? Like, can you sure you can?" Because they don't know me. Like, they hold me in their heart, but they don't know my heart. They don't know what I'm capable of today because they don't see me on a daily basis. So some of those people in our lives, they give us advice and they're not quite haters. They don't want to see us get hurt, but they still like kind of like put gum in our steps, right? They still
They
gets a
put
little
you in
like
this
sticky.
box. Like
They put
you're
you in this
just this
box.
one person. This is your identity.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you go home to Thanksgiving and you're like the little sister and you're still bickering with your older sister about how they cook the yams because, like, that's who you were the last time you all lived in the same house. Like, you just become the same person. Then there are the ones who are jealous. And those are the ones that, like, when they see you rise, they can only see it through the lens of their own stagnation.
Mm.
And you get a lot of smiles in the front, but a lot of knives in the back. I mean, Wonderhell just came out, debuted, #2, Wall Street Journal bestseller. Amazing. Good Morning America built an entire set for me. There were people in my life who I really expected were going to show up for me and post about the book and tell their friends about the book or even just retweet something that I put out there,
Yeah.
and nothing,
Mm.
silence. And that's hurtful and it's sad. And I could choose to keep score and to let that affect me, or I could just say, maybe those people aren't doing that because there's something going on in their lives, whether they're dealing with strife in their family or in their businesses, or maybe it's strife that's jealousy. I don't know, but it's their issue until I make it my issue, and I don't want to drink that poison.
Yeah.
Then there's the third group of people, and the third group of people are the ones who you run into them at the coffee shop and they're like, "You're going to do what? That's too scary." And what they really mean is like, "I couldn't do that. I'd be too scared." But the problem with each of these people, whether they love us or they're jealous of us or they're just scared, the problem with them is that they still give us their opinion or they make their little comments. And even though we laugh them off or we understand in terms of perspective that they're not really about us, it's about them, it still drops these little seeds of doubt in our brains that become cancer. So as soon as something doesn't work perfectly, you're like, oh, maybe that friend I went to high school with who's selling
They're
boxed
right.
wine on the internet was actually right about me and my, possibility. No, she wasn't. She doesn't know you. She doesn't know what you can do, but yet we still let it affect us. And so I think it's really important to, you just told me before we got on that you just came back from a group that you were masterminding with last week.
Yeah.
You have actively, intentionally turned up the volume on people in your life who are surrounding you with love and possibility and who are holding you up to a standard that maybe you didn't even know you were capable of, right? They won't let you
100%.
settle for mediocrity. And by doing that, you don't even have to actively turn down the sound in everyone else because the sound that you've turned up will start to drown all those people out. So I think we just need to be much more intentional about who we surround ourselves with and who we let in.
Yeah. And that's one of the ones in Doubtville is the tunnel. I guess that would be the tunnel of love, right?
Right. Who do you decide to go with, right? If we can go farther, faster together, who are you? Like my role, my strategy is I find the biggest ass kicker I know, somebody to whom I aspire to be, and I put him or her in my sidecar next to me, and I loop them in. I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to, where I want to go. And I make sure that they feel invested in me. So they help me get there. At the same time, I also make sure that I have peers that are with me because, you need peers so that you can vent and you can complain and you can celebrate and you can learn. And then I also make sure I have mentees in there with me because I think sometimes the best way to get over imposter syndrome, going back to what we talked about originally, is to teach something to somebody that you already know.
Mm.
And in that
Oh,
moment, you're
that's
like,
good.
oh, I'm filled with doubt about all these things I have to do going forward, but I just helped this person do a thing that I learned the hard way. I guess I do know some stuff after all.
Yeah, I had an experience with that with the mastermind. It was actually exactly what you're talking about. It's so true. It does help you at least boost you up like, oh, I've been able to do this. I have knowledge in this. So like, of course I could do this too. Yeah, I love
One of
that.
the people I talked to, in the book is a woman by the name of Dory Clark, who is she's a professor of business at Duke, and she has had multiple Wall Street Journal best-selling books. But she's decided she wants to become a Broadway musical writer. She wants to score Broadway musicals, and so she applied for this program, went into it, and on the very first day she scored 3 whole songs as part of her application. And the very first day people were going around the room, and one was like, well, I won a Tony Award, and one's like, I've scored 3 musicals, and I've worked with this producer and that producer. And she's like, I've scored 3 songs. I've written 3 whole songs. That's it. And she said, I have a choice. I can either put my hoodie up and like slink out of the room full of imposter syndrome, full of doubt, full of uncertainty, or I could say, you've done other things in your life that you didn't know how to do, and the competence led to confidence. You learned how to do those things. It's not that you're not good at writing Broadway musicals. You're just not good at writing Broadway musicals yet. And so she changed the way that she thought about it to like, of course I'm full of doubt. Of course I'm full of uncertainty. I'm supposed to be. This is actually exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And so she didn't worry about all the doubt because she knew that that was just part and parcel of the progress that she needed to make.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's go to Burnout City because I
Yes.
don't want to miss this one because I think anybody that is a real go-getter, driven entrepreneur, somebody that's really ambitious will hit burnout. I know when it's coming. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go.
Mm.
And if you don't know how to handle it, you're going to get stuck in it for a longer period of time. So I've kind of learned to notice the signs when I'm heading to Burnoutville or Burnout Town, Burnout City.
Burnout
so,
City. Yeah.
so what would you say for going into burnout? What would you, the experience and how to move through it? Some of the
So
rides.
I would say that I myself experienced burnout around the beginning of the pandemic. And I went to go talk to a therapist who diagnosed me very quickly as being an overachiever who is now stuck at home and can't overachieve. That was it. That was the diagnosis. That was my complex, overachiever complex. And and he said, he's like, we can work on that. And I was like, I don't want to work on that. Being an overachiever, that's a feature, not a
Yeah.
bug.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, but it's untenable. You can't sustain it. And I was like,
Mm.
no, I'm fine. And he countered with a very clever retort that I think he learned from Harvard Medical School. But you're here. And I was like, oh, touche. And what he said to me then, I think profoundly changed everything. He said, Laura, you don't have to give the trophies back. And in that moment, it was like I breathed for the first time, probably in 10 years. You
Wow.
don't have to give the trophies back. He's like, nobody is paying that much attention to you to know if you're collecting the next trophy and the next trophy and the next trophy. You are the sum of everything you've done to this point, and you
That's
don't
great.
have to continue the same pace in order to be of the same value. And for me, it really changed a lot. And not only that, I not only decided that I was going to no longer keep striving to impress people with trophies I didn't want, to impress the people I didn't care about. I was actually going to decide what trophies I did actually want and then move at my own pace to collect those. And it turned out that I was a lot lighter and more agile when I wasn't weighed down by all those other trophies.
Mm, that's so good. I love how he explained that. And that's so like change your perspective on how hard you have to, if you want to say hustle for the next thing. the next
Right.
trophy,
Like,
if you
think
want to say.
about it. Like, all the people around you in your space are like, hustle, 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 like bigger, better, faster, more. Like, how many followers do you have? How many downloads do you have? How many people are in your mastermind? And we talked in the beginning, like, what does success mean for you? It means fulfillment. How do you spend your time? Being able to control what you choose to do with your time when you do it. And, I interviewed Jordan Harbinger as, part of this. He's in the book as in the merry-go-round, the saying no to hustle porn. And he said, I interview all these people and they come to me in this moment when they are launching a book, they're launching a mastermind, they're launching a course. And they're like, man, like, this is the part where I don't see my kids. This is the
Mm,
part where I'm always exhausted. This is the part where I'm getting ulcers because I'm barely sleeping. This is the part where, like, I'm eating the crappiest food ever in, like, horrible hotel coffee shops. And he's like, yeah, that sounds terrible. And then after they finish recording, all these people are always like, so Jordan, where's your book? Where's your mastermind? Where's your course? And he's like, no, it sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. No way, man. And
that's
at the same
funny.
time, he's getting questions from, these, Sirius and XM, and they're all like, we want your show to be bigger. We want to take it and syndicate. And he's like, no, he's like, I have little kids. I got into this because I wanted the freedom and flexibility to be around my family, and kids spell love Time. There's only so many years that I'm going to be able to be
Mhm.
like, hey, it's a Tuesday. Let's skip school today and drive to Disney World because I can, before my kids are like, no way, man, you old fart. We don't want to spend time
Yeah.
with you. We want to, like, skip school and hang out with our kids on the beach. So our friends at the beach. So he's like, I need to take advantage of that now. And he's like, so I could keep hustling and hustling and hustling, or I could say, what actually matters to me most
Mm.
right now at this point in my life? And when he decided to step out of that race, he was able to really erase some of the stress of, like, am I doing enough? Am I competing enough? And say, I'm actually doing exactly what I want to be doing.
Yeah. And another one of those you interviewed, a good friend that I absolutely adore, Melissa Wiggins.
Oh, I
And
love Melissa.
oh goodness, who doesn't love anybody that, yeah, everybody go find Melissa
I know
Wiggins.
Melissa always tells me that Limitless changed her life, that she changed her entire career after reading it, and
Oh,
she gives me a lot more credit than she should. But
oh, that's remarkable. Yeah, when I saw that she shared your newest book, I was like, oh my gosh, and you're featured. And then I saw when I was going through your book, so with her, with mentioning her, you were talking about like focusing on what matters most to
yes,
you, and
yeah,
her story is remarkable. Yeah.
her story is incredible. I mean, her son was diagnosed with cancer, and was she was so busy trying to help him and help other families whose kids have cancer, and her son is good now,
Hmm.
for now. So people shouldn't worry about him. But she spent so much time trying to build a nonprofit to help other families who have kids with cancer that she ended up neglecting her own family. And it wasn't until one day where she was like, well, why am I doing this? What actually matters? And realized that there were certain things that only she can do. As the head of this nonprofit, as the head of this foundation, there were certain things where she had to show up and she had to do the presentation, the ask, the helping the families. But there were a lot of things that other people could do. And so, really thinking about what mattered to her, how she defined success, prioritizing what mattered most for her family, for these other families that she was working with, really helped her to change how she spent her time and find joy again in the work that is really hard work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you have stories of people you've interviewed for each ride, if you want to say. It really gives people connecting to somebody else's story and seeing themselves in it in some regard that, oh, I've experienced this too. I love that you do that. Uh,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
It's fun because there's such a range of people, from nonprofits to for profit to athletes to entrepreneurs, and I feel really lucky that they let me noodle around in their both their best and their worst moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so being still in Burnout City, I know there's just one last one I want to mention is that you say it's essential to notice when we feel complacent or bored.
Mm.
And maybe that's a sign this is the reason for burnout. So, what would you suggest if you start to feel or notice? Because I know there was a point. I love what I do. I love podcasting so much. I get, like, I remember I'm almost 200 episodes in. I've definitely recorded over 200, but
Congratulations.
thank you so much. But I remember, I remember at least up to the 150 because I remember that for some reason around 150, I noticed this. every time I would jump off an interview, I'd literally like jump up for joy. Like, that was the best interview. Oh my gosh, this guest. And I would tell my partner and, so excited. I don't do that as much anymore, even though, because I think now it feels like, I'm very accustomed to it, if you want to say, even though I still have that excitement, I still enjoy the interviews. I noticed I started to become maybe more, what's the word I'm looking for? Settled into it, like this is what I do, instead of the excitement I felt up to the 150. And so I
Hmm.
did notice that, but so it's more bringing the awareness, like, oh, are you still bringing your best into it? Like what do you need to shift to make it more exciting or whatnot? And so I think it's great to, like you mentioned, it's essential that we kind of look at that.
Yeah, I did not believe in complacency as part of burnout until I had a conversation with Whitney Johnson, who's like one of the top business thinkers in the world. And when she said what happens is when you sort of figure things out and things get a lot easier, like you've worked really hard, you didn't know what you were doing, then you like sort of hit the stride and things started to come together. And then you're like, okay, I got it. I got it. I
Absolutely.
got it. Maybe I'm mailing it in a little bit. Maybe I'm mailing it in. You get a little complacent and then you start to self-sabotage. And I was like, no, who would self-sabotage when like things are easy and they're working? And then she asked me to tell her a story about a time when I got luckier in business than I had any right to get. And
Hmm.
I told a story about how I pitched this huge deal having done very, very little homework. And I tell the story in the book, and it is not a story that makes me look very good. I got very lucky. I got far luckier than I should have. And if I had not gotten so lucky, it would have damaged my reputation. It would have damaged my firm's
Mm.
reputation. It would have damaged my team's reputation. And I left that meeting, and I remember it was this like scion of Wall Street. And he was like, his office looked over all of Central Park. And I walked out of the meeting and I walked across Central Park South. And then I walked through the park and I called my business partner and I'm like, I think it's time for me to go. Like, I think I need to leave because I, I think I think I just practiced malpractice.
Mm.
Like what I just did, like we got really lucky and we got the work, but we shouldn't have. And when I told her that story, she was like, there you go. And I think what happens is sometimes when we are successful at something and we sort of take for granted that we know how to do it, we do start to mail it in and we do start to do things that in the end might bite us. And actually, this happens with relationships. It happens with our
Oh
kids. It
yes.
happens with our work. It happens everywhere. And what I realized was that when you get to that place, you really have to like leap into the next thing that you're doing,
Mm.
because even if you don't, the decision will be made for you, because that's when you get fired. That's when the client doesn't hire you. That's when people stop listening. So, are you being complacent with this podcast? You read my book. I mean, I've done like 60 podcasts since, in the run up to the book. And probably half of them are people that are like, oh, so you wrote a book. It's called
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah.
Wonderhell. And I'm like, why? Why are you having a podcast if
I
you're not
think
even
that's
reading the
so.
book? Like, do you not care about your listeners? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're clearly not complacent. But, this idea of like, why are you doing it? And like reconnecting to loving being able
Yes.
to bring these ideas to the people who work with you, and maybe reading the comments of the people who are like, yes, thank you so much, this impacted me so hard. I think that's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Bringing that up, I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and I love reading the people I interview. I love reading their books, partly because I feel I'm on this journey with you all. Like everybody
Yes.
that's learning, that's tuning into this podcast, it's like I'm just like you, learning along the way, growing, evolving, because that's what I choose to do.
I mean, what
So
a gift to get paid to like talk to people about interesting ideas all day.
oh, it's so awesome, right? So I was talking to her about, like, I literally read her book and I kept on, I was pulling things out of the book and whatnot, just in the conversation. She's like, I'm like, as I was asking her a question, I'm like, can you tell I read the book? Because I was very specific about certain things. She's like,
Yes.
yeah. And literally, I've done hundreds. Yeah, she was saying like hundreds of interviews. And she's like, you'd be surprised how many people are like, so what do you do?
Oh my God. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like I did a podcast just before this and the person like lifted up the book and there were just like, you could tell like there were like 8 billion little sticky notes in there. And I was like, this is going to be a good interview.
Oh,
Right.
I
And
love
then
that.
there's some where like you start off and they're like, okay, so just give me a quick overview before we start. And you're just like, dude, not only did
Yeah.
I send you a book, I sent you a 4-page overview. Like you couldn't even read the
You
4-page overview. Like,
Oh
oh
my
my
gosh,
gosh.
I have to say I have never you are definitely your team, what you created to promote this book and like how you guide people for especially the interviews. I've never seen as much as I've seen as what I received from your team.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
it was phenomenal.
Well,
I
I
was
thank
pretty
you. I
impressed.
actually did it myself. I made it
I'm
myself. And the
impressed.
reason I did it, well, let me tell you why. Like, yes, it's for you. It's for you to do a better job helping me, right? So like of course I should do it, but also the process of writing that
Mm,
makes me crisper with my answers because it's like how do I get this idea around this one topic across in the shortest possible way with the most compelling story. And
absolutely.
so if you are in the business of like trying to convince people to grok your idea to like spend money on buying a book or your course or your master or whatever it is, being able to be super efficient with the way that you talk about it, not just like how do I say it the shortest possible way, but the shortest possible way with the most compelling story, I think is
Absolutely.
really important. And the process for me of putting that together but saying I'm only going to give myself 4 lines per chapter or like
Mm.
4 pages for the entire book or like 1 page per town, like that's discipline, right? So then when I get to the starting line I can think about nothing because like I did the work, right? So it's like
Yeah.
how do we do the things we need to do so that we're controlling the outcome as much as we can control it by putting in the incomes that we need.
Absolutely. It's a great lesson for anybody that's wanting to become a speaker as well. Like,
Yes,
because it's all about storytelling, right? So,
it's all about storytelling and nobody's going to
absolutely.
understand your idea unless you help them.
Yeah, absolutely magnificent. Well, we dived into so much. We went into all the towns and you gave a little look into some of the rides we all go on. That's the thing is like all of us, again, anybody that is at least growing is going through Wonderhell because you're doing something new, something exciting, something that's helping you evolve into the next version of you that you wish to become. So we'll all experience it. I'll experience this. I'll experience this. So this book is for everybody. So of course it will be in the show notes for you to grab it. It's available now. It just came out. So everybody go grab that because it's a really fun one. And we kind of gave a little overview of what it looks like. So just to close off and asking the question I ask all my guests, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson you've learned along your journey, what would that piece of wisdom be that you just feel everybody needs to hear right now?
I would say that the best piece of advice I ever got in my life, personally or professionally, was this: you're just not that important. And I know that sounds kind of harsh. And I know that's sort of a surprising thing for me to say, but I will say, I think a lot of us spend too much time trying to be all things to all people all the time. And if we stop for a minute and think, who am I that important to? Who are the people, the companies, the causes that I hold dear that I actually matter to and that actually matter to me, and double down there, then we can stop trying to be so important in all the places we're not, which just
Mm.
exhausts us from actually spending the energy on where we really matter.
Such good advice. So powerful because it's like it's kind of the outside validation. Like we think so many people are focused on us and we're trying to get acceptance and approval from everybody else, but really that's not the case. They're not focused on us. They're really focused on their own thing. So if we
Yeah,
just
my
stay in our
favorite
lane.
Eleanor my favorite Eleanor Roosevelt quote is this: we would worry much less about what other people thought about us if we realized how seldomly they did.
Mm, yeah.
Nobody's paying that much attention
So true.
except the people who really need you.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, Laura, this has been amazing. And I just love hearing and learning more about you. This is so great. I haven't heard you speak on stage, but I have a feeling I listened to your TED Talk and it was phenomenal. And I know you have 2 TED Talks. Am I right?
I
Yeah.
do. Yes.
So, of course, I'll plug all the goodies in the show notes. But where can people best find you just for those that are here on YouTube, listening in,
Y-
watching in?
Yeah, so my name is Laura Gassner Otting. All my good friends call me LGO. So I am on all the socials at Hey LGO.
Love
And
it.
lauragassnerotting.com or heylgo.com gets you to my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and all the insight you're sharing and helping people, at least go through the process a little bit with more ease, understanding that we all go through it. We go through these emotions, but how do we actually like thrive through them and rise above them? So thank you
Well,
for
thank you so
everything.
much.
You're
It's
so
been great fun, Erica.
welcome.